I will never forget that night when I drove on I-70 crossing Kansas. It was around 2 in the morning, and the road seemed endless, only lanes illuminated by the headlights of my car and total darkness around. I was already tired, fighting against sleep, when I saw a dark spot further ahead, standing on the side of the road. As I approached, I realized it was a truck, parked with the lights completely off. It was not uncommon to see trucks stopped, but something about that made me uncomfortable. The cabin was completely dark, but when I passed slowly, I noticed that there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. Even in the pitch, I was able to distinguish the contour of a face. The person didn't move, didn't turn on a light, nothing. He just stood still, looking directly at the road, as if he expected someone to notice. That made my stomach turn. I accelerated a little more, but I couldn't get the image out of my head. What really disturbed me was the way that figure seemed focused on me. It wasn't the look of someone resting or napping. It was as if I was waiting exactly for lonely drivers passing by at night. When I looked through the rearview mirror, I had the clear feeling that the face was still turned in my direction, even with my car moving away. Driving alone in the middle of the night is already uncomfortable in itself, but that night everything seemed even quieter. I lowered the volume of the radio because I wanted to pay attention to any different noise. The sound of the tires on the track wet by the drizzle seemed too loud. Every few minutes, I looked back to make sure the truck hadn't turned on the headlights and started following me. After about 15 minutes, I almost convinced myself that I had exaggerated. I thought maybe it was just a truck driver sleeping. But then, in a long curve, I noticed something that froze me inside. Another truck, stopped on the side of the road, identical to the first, also without headlights. The detail that made me almost lose my breath was that, when I passed, the cabin also had someone motionless, looking outside. This time, I slowed down to be sure of what I was seeing. There was no way to confuse. The silhouette was sharp, sitting on the bench, with her head slightly tilted forward. It wasn't a coincidence. 2 trucks in sequence, in the middle of the night, in the same conditions, with figures stopped inside. My heart raced. I began to imagine all the possibilities. What if they were criminals, waiting for someone tired enough to stop? What if it was some kind of ambush? The worst thing was that the road was almost empty. I hadn't seen another car for at least half an hour. If something happened, no one would show up to help. Anxiety took over, and I just thought about getting to the next gas station or exit soon. I kept the speed constant, trying not to look terrified, but my hands were sweating on the steering wheel. When I finally saw a sign indicating a rest area 5 miles away, I felt a little relief. But this relief didn't last long. In the rearview mirror, back there, I saw flashing lights. They weren't headlights on, but it seemed like a quick reflex, as if someone had turned on and erased the cabin of one of the trucks. That made me accelerate even more, ignoring any speed limit. I just wanted to get out of there. When I arrived at the station, the place was almost deserted, only 2 cars and a sleepy attendant at the cashier. I parked and stayed a few minutes inside the car, looking at the road. I didn't see any truck pass by. It was as if they had never left the place. But the feeling of being watched didn't abandon me. To this day, when I remember that night, I get goosebumps. I don't know if it was a coincidence, if I crossed paths with 2 eccentric drivers, or if there was something very wrong on that road. What bothers me is thinking about what would have happened if I had stopped to check, or if my car had given some problem right there. I could never drive on I-70 again during the night without thinking about these trucks stoated in the dark. And I always wonder, has anyone ever had the courage to stop and find out who was inside them? Story 2. Madison and I left the show late, laughing and commenting on the set list. The two-way road was almost deserted, only thush and fences on both sides. My tank was half level, and Waze showed 42 minutes to the city. The radio picked up badly, so we left it on low volume just to have company. I followed at 55 miles per hour, trying not to pass the deer that sometimes cross. The shallow fog formed spots on the asphalt, like smoke stuck to the ground. When the curve opened, I saw a point of light stopped right in the middle of the track. It looked like a strong flashlight, at the height of someone's chest, totally fixed. I let go of the accelerator foot, and Madison straightened her body on the seat, mute. "What's that?" she whispered, and I just replied that I was going to reduce and keep the track. The light didn't swing, it didn't signal, it just burned straight in our direction. That's when I understood that there was a man holding the flashlight, standing there. I stepped on the brake carefully, without braking, waiting for him to get out of the way. He didn't leave, nor did he give a sign of help, nor pointed to the shoulder. He was just static, with his arm outstretched, his hand firmly on the metal cylinder. A few meters away, I saw the unshaven and a dark cap, without a logo. The jacket seemed wet, perhaps because of the Serenity, glued to the body. My rearview mirror only showed empty behind, no car lights. I lowered the glass a little and asked if he needed help. In that second, he turned off the flashlight on purpose in a sharp click. The darkness swallowed his face, and I lost the contour for a moment. Madison grabbed my arm, her nails buried in her coat. The man started walking towards us, firm and slow steps. I threw the change backwards by reflex, but there was no place to retreat. I released the clutch, threw the car a little to the side of the road, and kept the headlight. I wanted the beam to take his legs to know the distance. He didn't raise his hands, didn't scream, didn't make a stop sign. The steps didn't accelerate, they just came right, like who knows the time. I felt that bad cold in my stomach, like before an accident. Madison said go, 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 without taking her eyes off the windshield. I turned the steering wheel to the left to turn around the outside and swerve. The man then tilted his head, as if calculating my movement, and changed the position of the body exactly to enter my route. It was necessary to choose in a second between braking for good or accelerating. I honked 3 times long, to see if he retreated from the track. He didn't retreat, and I accelerated enough to cross the corner. I passed less than a meter from him, and I swear he smiled sideways. The flashlight was still off, but I saw the shine of the metal in the hand. The car swayed on the asphalt patch, and I started up to 65 miles per hour. I looked in the rearview mirror hoping to see him getting small back there. Instead, I saw a thread of light rekindle, now pointed at us. It was the flashlight on again, following the car with strange precision. He's aiming at us, Madison said, already with a thin voice. I wanted to believe it was just a freaked-out person asking for a ride. But no one turns off the light and advances on the hood like that, in the middle of nowhere. The road opened in a straight stretch, and I breathed to stabilize my hand. I felt the steering wheel lighter, the steering vibrating with the worn asphalt. That's when the flashlight flashed once very hard back there. I thought about calling 911, but the cell phone signal marked a bar. Madison tried hers, and was only in the calling that she didn't complete. I repeated that there were 30 minutes left for a post 24 hours ahead. She asked me not to stop for anything, neither for cone, nor for anything. If a tire punctures, we drive on the rim, she said without humor. I held the steering wheel with both thumbs, so as not to shake so much. Then came 2 reflections on the side of the road, one on each side. For a moment, I thought they were deer eyes catching a lighthouse. But they were low points of light, like lanterns resting on the floor. 2 cold circles in the dark, perfectly aligned with the track. I passed between them, and my stomach turned again, sweat in my hands. Are there more people? Madison asked, and I didn't know how to answer. The next curve brought a narrow bridge, without shoulder. Yellow plate indicating 40 miles per hour, and I was already coming at 50, holding on. The side grills were damp, reflecting my headlights and lines. In the middle of the bridge, something metallic jingled under the car, dry. It looked like a loose chain beating, but there was nothing on the floor. The panel didn't turn on alert, but the vibration changed a little. Madison turned her neck back and said she couldn't see the light anymore. The rearview mirror showed only dark, totally empty, no dots. Even so, the feeling that we had company stuck. I accelerated at the exit of the bridge and focused on the rest area 12 miles sign. There's little left, there's little left, I repeated almost automatically. She asked me not to enter if there were many trees closing. 2 more minutes, and we saw a car stopped on the shoulder, flashing on. By instinct, I went to reduce it to pass more slowly and observe. In the back seat, I noticed a faint glow. It looked like a cell phone screen. No person visible on the steering wheel, nothing through the side glass. When I paired, the cell phone light went out by itself at once. The blinker continued, but the interior turned black, like the truck before. Madison said, "Don't stop," and I obeyed, foot firmly on the accelerator. The speedometer hit 70, and I wanted to cry for about 3 seconds. I thought of my father saying never to stop as a stranger on the road. I thought of the car manual and the fire extinguisher under the seat. I thought of the man with the flashlight in front of us, calculating step. And the question came, what if he was guiding us to someone? We passed through an old exit with a graffiti plate and high vegetation. In the same second, the radio hissed and caught thick static. A mixed voice came out for half a second, cut, almost name. I turned off the radio on the stew, sweaty hands slipping on the button. The silence inside the car was worse than the static one. It was just the noise of the engine and the very thin rain on the windshield. Madison lifted the seat and asked me to blink the top once. I blinked, and something shone ahead, on the right side of the bush. It was the same flashlight, now at ground level, fixed. I mentioned changing tracks, and the light moved a palm, as if responding to my steering wheel, imitating the gesture. I swallowed dry and said, "We're going straight, no joke." The next 3 minutes were the longest I've ever lived awake. Every curve seemed to hide someone, every sign reflected strange. I timed the distance on the odometer to feel real progress. 6.4 miles to the gas station, then 5.9, then 5.2, in anxious count. Madison held my elbow just to keep me centered. The high beam caught a branch crossed on the track thick. I deviated at the limit, and the tires sang lightly, control on the nail. I looked in the mirror, and I swear I saw the shadow of someone coming out of the Bosch. Not running, just popping up and standing up, as before. The flashlight lit up in the back once again, a flash. My shoulders hurt from tension, as if I were carrying weight. I promised myself that I wouldn't touch the car until the big light. Finally, the post sign appeared, red and blue flashing. It looked like a 5-star hotel, so beautiful in that void. I turned to the patio and parked near the door, under the camera. The hands didn't obey. I let go of the steering wheel slowly, so as not to fall. Madison came down with me, and the gas station attendant noticed our state. I asked the guy to look at the road for a minute, just to confirm. He went out to the edge of the courtyard, looked, came back shrugging his shoulders. "No one else coming," he said, with the face of someone who saw this before. I bought water, breathed, washed my face in the cold bathroom. In the mirror, I was pale, my lipstick all erased. Madison trembled less, but still held her cell phone. We decided to wait 15 minutes before traveling. When we returned to the counter, I asked for images of the external camera. The attendant said he didn't have access, only the manager in the morning. Even so, he pulled a small monitor behind the cashier. "You can see the patio. The road sometimes appears." The recording showed our arrival, my car trembling. Rewinded for 2 minutes, nothing but dark strip and rain. No stable light point, no recorded silhouette. I asked about the truck without a lighthouse that we saw half an hour before. He said that week, 2 others reported something similar. People stopped with flashlights on the track, on the same stretch. A couple entered the courtyard panting on Tuesday, and never returned there. "I would avoid that curve after midnight," he added. We stayed at the station until the heart comes out of the neck and returns to the chest. When we decided to go, we agreed on the most illuminated path. Before starting, I did a test, high beam flashing twice. Far away, the darkness returned only rain and wind stirring grass. No flashlight answering, no shadow emerging. Even so, I left first slowly with the blinker on. On the way back to the highway, I stayed in the middle of the lane, without a shoulder. Madison kept recording the windshield with her cell phone on. 2 minutes later, a trailer passed in the opposite direction. I almost cried with relief just by seeing another human presence. Waze got locked and came back, marking arrival already inside the city. At the hotel, I locked the door and pushed the dresser out of pure impulse. In the following days, I told 2 friends who run at night. One said that's an old scam, people trying to make you stop. Another said he had already seen it, but that sometimes there is no one afterwards. Just the light repeating itself, as if someone knew the timing. I found myself thinking about the 2 low lanterns on the side of the road. Someone positioned that they're aligned millimetric without error. It's not something thrown at random, it's a plan and intention. I checked the route and marked the stretch as a void on my map. And I started to take emergency spray on the console, just in case. Madison bought a whistle and put it on her keychain. We also agree on a keyword per message. If one sends it, the other calls and stays on the line until it arrives. Since that night, I can no longer relax in a shoulderless curve. Flashlight on the side of the road, for me, it's no longer a silly detail. I know it could be someone asking for real help, and that weighs. But I also know that there are those who take advantage of the darkness and the scare. If one day you find someone standing in the middle of the track, think fast. Keep your distance, signal from afar, look for big light ahead. If the behavior doesn't match with a request for help, don't stop. Register time, road point, and notify as soon as you have a signal. We think it's never up to us, until it is. In Virginia, in that curve, I learned the hard way. The image of him turning off the flashlight still comes back when I drive. And you, would you have stopped, or would you also have passed by the corner and followed? Story 3. I was driving alone that night on I-84 in Oregon, a stretch that always seemed too long to me when the clock was already past 11. The traffic was almost non-existent, only a few trucks far ahead from time to time, but for half an hour it was just me, the low sound of the radio and the headlights illuminating the continuous track. That's when I noticed through the rearview mirror a pair of headlights that suddenly appeared and stayed glued behind me. At first, I thought it was just someone faster waiting for a chance to overtake, but the minutes went by and the car was still at the same distance, stuck to my rear as if I was afraid of losing track. I kept the speed stable, 60 miles per hour, and even gave an arrow to the right, making room if I wanted to pass. The car just adjusted the distance, following every curve and every slight acceleration change I made. That made me uncomfortable. The road was 2 lanes, and as late as it was, there was plenty of space for him to simply overtake me and continue traveling. The feeling was of being tested, observed. After 20 minutes in this strange game, I could no longer concentrate on anything other than the white lights burning in the rearview mirror. When I finally saw an open gas station, I breathed a sigh of relief and decided to enter. I wanted to stretch my legs, buy something to drink, and especially get that car off my tail. As soon as I entered the illuminated courtyard, I looked sideways hoping to see him stop too, but to my surprise he went straight, going straight down the highway. My heart slowed down little by little, and I thought maybe it was just a coincidence, someone traveling tired at the same pace as me. Still, I bought a coffee. I stayed there for a few minutes trying to convince myself that there was nothing too much. I resumed the road shortly after midnight. The strip was empty again, only the sound of the tires against the wet asphalt by the Serene. That's when, in less than 10 minutes, the same headlights appeared behind me again. I recognized it immediately by the pattern. The same distance, the same perfect alignment with the rear of my car. The blood froze on the spot. That was not a distracted traveler. There was no way it could be a coincidence. Someone was following me, expecting something I didn't understand. My coffee cooled on the support, but my hands sweated on the steering wheel. I decided to test it. I accelerated a little over the limit, and as expected, the car accelerated too. I suddenly reduced it, and he reduced it. I changed lanes unnecessarily, and in a matter of seconds, he did the same. There were no more doubts. I felt a mixture of anger and panic, but what predominated was the suffocating feeling of not having any control over the situation. Every mile traveled made me more anxious, wondering if I should stop, call the police, or just keep driving until dawn. That's when I saw a sign indicating a rest area 3 miles away. I decided to take a chance. I entered abruptly, but instead of stopping in the parking lot, I went all the way around the courtyard and returned to the highway on the other side. For a few seconds, I didn't see the headlights in the rearview mirror. The hope was short-lived. They reappeared, stronger, as if the driver had accelerated to the maximum to catch up with me. The heart seemed to hammer in the chest. I knew that if I stopped in an isolated place, it could be worse. I went ahead with my mind fixed on reaching some nearby city. After almost 40 minutes of tension, I finally saw the lights of a small urban center. The car was still behind me, but when I entered the city, with traffic lights and movement of some open bars, it slowed down and ended up turning into a side street. I couldn't see who was driving, nor write down the sign, only the lanterns disappearing in the dark. I stopped in front of a 24-hour cafe, sat on the bench, and stayed there for more than an hour, trying to understand what had just happened. I never found out the reason, nor if it was a real threat or just a sick game of someone on the road. What I know is that to this day, whenever I drive at night, I pay attention to any car that stays too long behind me. That feeling of being followed, of having nowhere to escape in the middle of the darkness, is something that never left my head. Story 4. I always had the habit of coming back from work later, after 10 at night, because I used to take extra shifts to save some money. That specific night, the road was almost deserted, only the sound of the engine and a few trucks that passed from time to time. I was tired, with heavy eyes, and just wanted to get home. It was in this routine climate that I saw a car stopped on the side of the road, with the doors open and the flasher off, which seemed strange to me right away. The first thing I thought of was someone needing help, maybe an electrical breakdown, maybe someone getting sick, because there was no one else around. I instinctively slowed down, more because of doubt than because of the certainty that I should stop. When I got closer, I felt a chill. There was no one around the car, no movement. The two front doors were wide open, as if the occupants had left in a hurry, but there was no suitcase, bag, or any sign of close people. That silence was what bothered me the most, because usually when there is a broken car, you see at least someone waving for help. Not there. Only the car stopped, with the headlights still on, illuminating part of the roadside th. The instinct told me to accelerate and follow, but curiosity made me keep the speed low, as if I wanted to confirm that there was no one inside or fallen to the ground. It was exactly at that moment, when I was almost level with the car, that it happened. A man emerged from the dark and ran to my car, trying to open the passenger door with all his strength. The noise of the doorknob being pulled echoed loudly, and I stopped for a second of pure shock. If it wasn't my habit to keep the doors always locked as soon as I get in the car, he would have been able to open without difficulty. I could only react because I heard the crash of the pulling failing. The vision of him desperately pulling the door paralyzed me for a few seconds, but the adrenaline made me punch my foot on the accelerator. I started quickly, feeling the car shake on the wet track, but my heart shot as if it were going to explode. When I looked through the rearview mirror, I saw the man running back to the car stopped on the side of the road. In a matter of seconds, he got into the vehicle and turned on the headlights, which lit me up from afar. That's when I realized that it wasn't a coincidence, it wasn't an emergency situation. It was a trap, and I almost fell into it without thinking. His car entered the track right behind me, and began to follow me closely, accelerating as I tried to increase the distance. The road in that stretch was deserted, only 2 lanes and a lot of the around. There was nowhere to enter, there were no cities nearby. All I could do was keep driving and pray that there was a post or any illuminated place right ahead. The car was still stuck to me, sometimes getting so close that the headlights almost blinded me through the rearview mirror. I tried to keep my hands steady on the steering wheel, but my whole body trembled. I started to imagine 1,000 horrible scenarios. What would happen if my car had any problems, if I was forced to stop on the side of the road too? I decided to change my tactic. I accelerated more than I should, even though I knew the risk. My speedometer marked above the limit, but I didn't care. I needed to create some distance between us. But every time I accelerated, he did the same. He kept the chase as if it were a game for him. The road seemed endless. Every minute seemed like a whole hour. I knew that if I didn't find a way out right away, my options would be few. In the meantime, I started honking and flashing the high beam, hoping to get the attention of some driver coming in the opposite direction. But nothing. The road seemed abandoned. After about 10 minutes of chasing, I saw a sign indicating a rest area 2 kilometers away. That was like a breath of hope. I didn't know if there would be anyone there, but at least it would be an illuminated place. I made the decision to move on, without signaling anything, so as not to make my intention clear. But when I got closer, I realized through the rearview mirror that he also adjusted the direction, as if he knew exactly what I would do. The fear grew even more. I entered the courtyard, and instead of stopping, I made a quick turn and returned to the highway without slowing down. It was risky, but it worked for a few seconds. I lost sight of his headlights. The feeling of relief was short-lived. Shortly after returning to the road, the same headlights appeared again, now more distant but present. It was him, again, insisting on the persecution. My heart felt like it couldn't take it anymore. I began to think that it would never end, that he would follow me to the city or until I lost control. Each curve was a torture. Each lighthouse illuminating the bush seemed to hide another threat. Breathing was short. I barely noticed the time passing. That's when something even stranger happened. After about 15 minutes of continuous chase, the headlights simply disappeared. There was no return, there was no visible deviation, they just disappeared from the road behind me. I kept accelerating for a few minutes, looking nonstop through the rearview mirror, waiting for them to reappear. But they didn't come back. Only the pitch of the road and absolute silence. I didn't understand. He couldn't have disappeared like that. There were no side roads. There were no entrances that justified the disappearance. It was as if it had evaporated. I got home shaking, with my hands still clinging to the steering wheel. I parked in the garage and sat for a few minutes trying to process everything. The whole body was wet with sweat, even with the air conditioning on during the trip. That night, I couldn't sleep well. Every lighthouse that passed through the street made me get out of bed and look out the window, afraid of seeing that car stopped again in front of the house. I wondered if it was really over, or if it was just a break before something worse. The next day, I told some coworkers, but most just said it was probably some crazy driver playing on the road. But I know what I saw. I know the intention in that man's eyes when he tried to open my car door. It wasn't someone joking, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a clear attempt to catch me off guard, to force me to stop. To this day, when I remember the noise of the handle being pulled, I feel my stomach turn. It was close, and the only thing that saved me was the habit of always locking the doors. Since then, I have developed a fear of deserted roads at night. I avoid traveling alone after dark as much as possible, and when there is no way, I drive in constant alert, watching each car behind me. I never saw that man or that car again, but it doesn't matter. The trauma is already gone. What really terrifies me is not having an explanation for the sudden disappearance, as if it had disappeared into the air. The road was straight, there was no way to just disappear that way. That's what keeps me awake for many nights, trying to understand. And that's why I share it here. Maybe someone has already experienced something similar. Maybe they can explain better what may have happened that night. But to this day, I haven't found any answer that makes sense. Have you ever gone through something similar, to be sure you are being followed, but suddenly the threat simply disappears without a trace? Story 5. I've always traveled a lot by car, mainly for work, and I've gotten used to long stretches of deserted road. But that night in Nevada, something happened that I still can't explain. I was alone, returning from a meeting in a neighboring city, and I decided to take the main road even though I knew it would be long and not very busy. The sky was completely clear, without clouds, and the moon illuminated part of the surrounding desert. It was not uncommon to drive miles without crossing with another car. I had low music on the radio and tried to stay awake, since it was past midnight. After almost an hour without seeing a living soul, I saw an old toll booth in front that I knew was deactivated. I had already passed by it other times, and it always seemed abandoned, with the gates raised and signs indicating that it had not been in use for years. This time, however, something caught my attention immediately. The lights inside the cabin were on, a white and strong lighting, which contrasted with the darkness of the road. I slowed down instinctively because that didn't make sense. As I got closer, I realized that it wasn't just the light. Behind the cabin glass, there was someone sitting, completely motionless, as if he were in a working position. The figure didn't move a muscle, it just remained there, staring forward. I couldn't distinguish the face, because the reflection of the light made it difficult, but the silhouette of a sitting human body was visible. That gave me an instant chill, because I was absolutely sure that that toll was closed. It didn't make sense to have someone there. My first thought was that maybe it was some kind of security, or someone who had access to the place. But there was no car parked nearby, no movement. Just that motionless figure. I passed slowly, trying to observe without drawing attention, and it gave me the feeling that the person was looking directly at me, following the passage of the car. The breathing became heavy and the stomach cold, but I forced my foot on the accelerator, determined to move on. For a few minutes, I tried to convince myself that I had imagined. The tired brain could have confused the vision with a mannequin or something like that, left to scare curious people. But the more I thought, the more I remembered the posture of that body. He didn't look like a doll, he looked like someone of flesh and blood, completely motionless, as if he wanted to be noticed. With every kilometer I advanced, the rearview mirror seemed to call me, as if I were going to see lights behind me at any moment. I kept driving and started to notice something even stranger. Although I had advanced a lot, I had the feeling of still being observed. It was irrational, but it seemed that the eyes of that figure had stuck to me. I turned on the loudest radio, opened the window a little to feel the wind, but nothing helped to reduce the anguish. I was just thinking about getting to the next city, finding some post or illuminated place where I could take a deep breath. After about 20 minutes, I finally saw another stop, a gas station. I entered the courtyard quickly, as if I were running away from something. I parked near the convenience store and stayed inside the car, trying to catch my breath. That's when something gave me goosebumps even more. Through the window of the gas station, I saw that the security TV, which showed road cameras, was on behind the cashier. The toll booth appeared on the screen, and the lights were still on. The figure was still there, motionless, exactly in the same position. The attendant noticed my gaze and casually commented that that cabin had appeared on the cameras for years, but there was never anyone working there. I asked if she also saw someone sitting inside. She looked at me strangely and said no, that she had never seen anything but dust and broken furniture. I got cold. I didn't want to insist, because the woman would probably think I was delirious. I paid for a bottle of water and went back to the car, but now I'm sure something was wrong. The road to my city seemed endless after that. Every shadow made me think of that motionless figure. Was there really someone sitting there? Did the camera show something else, something that only I could notice? The mind didn't stop creating hypotheses. I remember locking the car doors and checking the rearview mirror every minute, hoping to see those lights again. But the road remained dark and silent. When I got home, it was almost 3 in the morning. I lay down without sleep, my whole body still on alert. I mentally relived the moment when I slowly passed through the cabin and felt the gaze glued to me. No matter how much I tried to rationalize, nothing explained why the lights were on in an abandoned structure. Much less that motionless figure behind the glass, as if it were just waiting for someone to pass by. In the following days, I told the story to some friends, but everyone laughed. They said it was probably a mannequin put as a joke, or just my tired mind playing a trick on me. But I know what I saw. The sharpness of that scene was not a matter of imagination. It was too real, too disturbing. And the detail of the camera at the station showing the cabin with the lights on still torments me. It wasn't a loose memory, it was a record that was there on the screen. To this day, every time I pass by that road, I avoid looking directly at the cabin. But from the corner of my eye, I swear I still see the light on, even when I try to convince myself that it's off. I never slowed down that stretch again. I prefer to accelerate and not think too much. But the inconvenience stays with me until now. Was it a human being? Was it something I can't explain? Or just a trick of my mind on a tiring night? The fact is that I was never able to drive quietly on deserted roads at dawn. And as much as I want to believe in logical explanations, deep down I know that that cabin hides something. Has anyone else ever gone through something similar, to see someone where no one should exist? Story 6. I've never been the type to get scared easily on the road. I work traveling between small towns in the countryside, and I've seen everything. Animals crossing out of nowhere, strange accidents, even people walking alone in totally desolate stretches. But what I experienced on a night driving down a rural road near Topeka, in Kansas, doesn't compare to anything I've ever been through. It was around 11 a.m., and I was coming back from a dinner at some friend's house. The road was narrow, almost without signage, and lit only by the headlights of my car. The stretch was completely empty, without houses, without shops, only plantations and wire fences on both sides. While driving, I saw from afar the taillights of a car slowly crossing an intersection. The first thing I thought was that someone was lost, because the speed was strangely low, almost as if I was looking for a way out. It was a dark sedan. It looked like an old model, maybe early 2000s. As I got closer, something started to bother me. The car walked in a straight line, but it didn't seem to have a firm direction, as if it was just sliding on the asphalt. I thought maybe the driver was drunk or feeling sick, and I considered the possibility of stopping to help. But the closer I got, the more I realized that there was something deeply wrong. The car cabin was lit by my headlights, and I could clearly see that there was no one in the driver's seat. At the time, my heart raced. I blinked several times, trying to convince myself that I was seeing wrong, that maybe the window was too dark or that the driver had bent down. But no, the steering wheel was completely empty, and there was no shadow of anyone driving. The sedan followed for a few more meters in a straight line, until it gently touched the side of the road. The engine still seemed to be on, but the car stopped by itself, as if it had reached exactly the point where it should stop. It slows down even more, and I slowly passed by the side of the car, with the window of my vehicle closed and the doors locked. The back seats were empty too. It was a dark car, light leather interior, and you could see it clearly. The only thing that was there was a keychain hanging from the ignition, swaying slightly. The chill in the spine was immediate. I wanted to believe it was some kind of mechanical failure. Maybe the car had gone down by itself, but the road was straight, without slope. In addition, the movement seemed too controlled. It was not an ungoverned car. It was as if I had been led to that point on purpose. I moved on, trying to convince myself that I shouldn't get into something I didn't understand. But deep down, the feeling was that I had just witnessed something impossible to explain. After a couple of kilometers, I couldn't stand the doubt and decided to turn around. I don't know if it was courage or pure stupidity, but something inside me wanted to confirm what I had seen. When I arrived again at the intersection, the car was no longer there. The edge of the road was empty, only the recent tire marks on the wet asphalt of the Serene. There was no engine noise, no sign of headlights ahead. It was as if that car had simply disappeared. At that point, panic took over. I knew I hadn't imagined. I turned on the radio to distract my mind, but the silence of the road seemed increasingly suffocating. I got home much later than I should have, because I drove the rest of the way at low speed, always looking around, trying to make sure I wasn't being followed. When I finally parked in the garage, I stayed inside the car for a few minutes, still processing what had happened. My hand was shaking so much that I had to take several deep breaths before turning off the ignition. Never before had such a common stretch of road caused me so much fear. Some said it was probably a car in automatic test, others that someone should be down to scare me. The road was deserted, and there was no place for someone to just disappear like that. Since that night, whenever I hit the road alone, I have the habit of keeping the doors locked and my eyes attentive to any strange movement. It's not free paranoia. After seeing a car move by itself and disappear without explanation, any unlikely scenario seems possible. I've seen a lot of things traveling, but nothing that has left me so disturbed. To this day, when I remember, I feel my heart speed up the same way. I don't know what that sedan was, if it had any logical explanation that I just couldn't understand, or if it was something that goes beyond what we can explain. If anyone has ever been through something similar, I would like to know. Story 7. I'll never forget the night I heard those knocks on my car. It was early October. I came home late from work in Minneapolis and always took the same deserted highway towards my city. It was already past midnight, the traffic was practically non-existent, and you only saw the headlights of cars very far away from time to time. The road was wet from the rain that had fallen earlier, and the cleaners still passed from time to time to clean the foggy glass. I was tired, just wanting to get home, when the noise started. At first, it sounded like a metallic sound, as if something was loose in the back of the car. I thought it was the swinging stipe, or some tool stuck in the wrong way. But as I followed, the noise became more rhythmic, almost like strong blows. It was impossible to ignore. With each beat, I felt a light vibration through the car, and my heart began to speed up. I tried to convince myself that it was just some loose piece, but the truth is that it didn't seem like something mechanical. The beats increased in intensity, and at that moment I had the clear impression that they came from the trunk. There were 3 or 4 punches in a row, as if someone was hitting from the inside out. I didn't want to believe it, but it was exactly that feeling. I held the steering wheel tightly with wide eyes, praying that it was just my imagination added to the tiredness of the night. Still, my hands began to sweat, and I felt my stomach freeze. After a few minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned on the arrow and stopped the car on the side of the road, in a poorly lit stretch, with only 1 mileage plate nearby. I stayed a few seconds inside the car, taking a deep breath, trying to decide if I really should leave. The beats had stopped as soon as I parked, which made me even more nervous. It was as if whoever or whatever was inside had stopped on purpose. I got up the courage, turned off the engine and got out of the car, trying to stay calm. The silence of the road was deafening. You could only hear the distant sound of crickets and the wind passing through the trees. I walked slowly to the back. Each step seemed to weigh tons. When I put my hand on the trunk lid, my breathing was accelerated as if I had run a marathon. It took me a few seconds to gather the courage to open. I lifted the lid at once, and to my surprise, there was absolutely nothing strange. The sterret was firm, the tools in place, nothing loose. I passed the flashlight through the inside, checked every corner, but everything seemed normal. The empty space made me even more confused, because I knew I had heard the bangs. It was impossible that it had come out of nowhere. I closed the lid tightly, trying to push away the thoughts, but my heart was still beating out of step. I went back into the car and stood still for a few minutes, just watching the mirrors. I had the feeling that someone could be looking at me from the darkness. The discomfort was so strong that I could barely get the car moving again. I decided to send a message to a friend, just to feel less alone, but the cell phone signal was too weak in that region. This only increased the panic, because I felt completely isolated. When I finally took a deep breath and went on my journey, the beats started again. This time more spaced, but still audible and clear as before. I looked desperately at the mirrors, as if I could see something reflected there, but there was nothing but the darkness of the road. It was as if the noise was a response to my attempt to ignore what had happened before. I kept driving until I saw a gas station open at a junction. I parked quickly and asked the gas station attendant to help me look at the car. He opened the trunk with me and checked everything calmly. He confirmed that there was nothing wrong, no loose piece. Still laughing, he said that the noise probably came from something stuck under the car or something like that. I pretended to believe, but deep down I knew it wasn't that. What scared me the most was the logic of the beats. They were not random noises of loose pieces, they were strong and rhythmic blows, as if someone wanted to draw attention. 3 beats, pause, 3 more beats. This pattern haunts me to this day, when I remember that night. It was so human that I get goosebumps just thinking about it. I had never felt such an irrational fear, so visceral, and even after seeing the empty trunk, the feeling did not disappear. I got home late, almost 3 in the morning, and left the car parked on the street, afraid to open it again alone in the garage. I spent the night awake, remembering the sequence of beats echoing in the silence of the road. The next day, I took the car to a trusted mechanic, but he found absolutely nothing wrong. He said that the vehicle was in perfect condition. This only increased my anguish, because it eliminated any logical explanation. To this day, every time I drive alone at night, I remember that feeling of being accompanied by something that shouldn't be there. I never heard that sound again, but the memory haunts me as if it had happened yesterday. I don't know if anyone has ever been through something similar, but I still wonder, what could be hitting the trunk that night if there was nothing inside? Story 8. I was traveling alone through the countryside of Illinois, returning from a visit to a friend. The area seemed completely deserted, only a few yellowish lampposts poorly illuminating the parking lot, and a small concrete building with public bathrooms. There were no other cars around, which already made me uncomfortable, but I thought it would be quick. The wind made the dry leaves drag on the ground, and only the weak buzzing of the poles could be heard. The place smelled of disinfectant mixed with mold. The walls were scratched, and there was only one of the lamps working, launching a precarious lighting. While using the bathroom, I had the strange feeling of being watched. I washed my hands quickly and left, just wanting to get back on the road. The silence outside seemed even more intense, as if something had changed in the short time I was inside. I walked to the car, and it was at that moment that I felt a chill run down my spine. All the doors were unlocked. I clearly remember pressing the alarm and hearing the beep, confirming that they were locked when I left. I looked around, hoping to see someone, but the parking lot was empty as before. The bench was really dirty, the earth still moist, with defined marks that resembled the shape of wet pants. I was alone since I left home, no one had entered with me, and there was certainly no mud in the car before. I looked at the floor and saw small splashes scattered on the carpet, as if someone had really entered and left quickly. I closed the door immediately, threw the backpack in the passenger seat, and started the car with trembling hands. I stood still for a few seconds, staring through the rearview mirror, waiting to see someone emerge from behind the building or among the nearby trees. Nothing moved, but the discomfort was overwhelming. I turned on the high beams and walked around the rest area slowly, looking for any sign of another car, a person walking, anything. It was empty. I decided to hit the road immediately. As I accelerated, I felt as if someone could be lying in the trunk, waiting for the right moment to show up. The fear was so great that I could barely keep my hands firmly on the steering wheel. I turned on the radio just to break the silence, but the static of the poorly tuned station made me even more nervous. I drove for miles without the courage to stop again, looking at the back seat all the time through the mirror. When I finally arrived at a 24-hour gas station, already in another city, I pulled up and went straight to ask an employee to accompany me to the car. He illuminated the interior with the flashlight and, in fact, confirmed that there was fresh mud scattered on the back seat and carpet. He asked if I had given someone a ride, but when I explained, he just looked at me strangely and said, "Maybe it's better not to travel alone at this time." I spent the rest of the morning parked there, without the courage to continue traveling. The smell of wet dirt inside the car seemed to impregnate the air, like a constant reminder that someone had been there without me noticing. To this day, I can't understand how or why. The only thing I know is that I always locked the doors twice now, and never stopped in completely deserted rest areas. It may have been some kind of joke, someone trying to steal, or something worse that I don't even want to imagine. The idea that someone was inside my car, without me seeing it, gives me goosebumps to this day. I've never told this story to many people because it seems unlikely, but I swear it's real. There was no explanation for those unlocked doors, nor for the mud in the back seat. Since that night, every time I stop somewhere isolated, I feel the same tension in my chest, as if someone was watching me. And I still wonder, if I had spent a few more minutes in the bathroom, would I have found someone sitting in the back seat when I came back? I'm really grateful for staying until the last minute. It's always good to know that you're here, listening to every detail. If you liked it, Comment which part was the scariest for you. And of course, sign up to keep listening to stories as dark as this one. See you in the next video.